Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, why am I not happy? That's not the question I'm asking. Maybe that's the question you're asking. And I would ask, why are you watching a podcast for an answer to that question? I don't know, but I'm glad you're here. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good. The pursuit of happiness is a pursuit as old as humanity itself, I think, and yet it seems to have reached a fever pitch in recent years as we are trying to find any possible way we can to just feel happier. And it's so funny where this pursuit will take us and the things we'll get into. I don't know about you. I'll just speak for myself. I've read a ton of self-help books over the years and always trying to think, like approaching these books or these strategies, hoping that they will give me the secret. That's also literally a self-help book, The Secret. That they'll give me a secret that will teach me how I can have a happy and fulfilled life. Because there's just something in the moment right now that feels like it is off. That would lead me then to pursuing these self-help books. I'm guessing many of you have felt that yourself. Just a general low-level dissatisfaction with how your life is. And I'm also guessing that some of you have had periods of your life, unfortunately, where that low-level disappointment, dissatisfaction has spiraled and snowballed into something bigger, like real diagnosable depression or some other mental health struggles. And that's a terrible place to be in. And when you find yourself in those moments, yeah, you want to just make it stop. Like, what do I need to do? What strategy do I need to deploy? How can I fix this? Because this is miserable right now. I'm not going to pretend like this podcast can fix all of that, but I am interested in looking at this question that seems to constantly plague us about why we can't escape that low level dissatisfaction, why we're constantly pursuing happiness in new and different ways. And it's so interesting how that, for different people, that can take on so many different applications. Oh, I'm going to try and really commit to my faith life because that will maybe make me happy, or I'm going to purchase something. Let's talk about that consumerist angle first, because I'm sure many of you have had the experience of stress buying. The other day, I had a really tough day at work, and I, was talking to my wife about it at night, and, we were processing things. She's always so helpful and so understanding and kind of helping me see different angles and giving me some good sound advice for how to escape from the frustrations that I was feeling. And then the next day, I'm at work having a much better day thanks to a good night's rest and some really strong coffee and those conversations with my wife. And so it's like halfway through the day. And my wife, on that particular day, I know she got home from work early. She gets home from work early on Tuesdays. And so she texted me and she says, "Did you make a bunch of stress purchases on Amazon last night?" And I confess to you, dear listener, that I did. Yeah, there were a few things that I needed to buy that had been on my list. And while I was there having that conversation with my wife about the stresses and frustrations of the day, at that same time, I was on my phone adding things to my shopping cart, and they arrived the next day. There is something so interesting about this, though, about buying something in order to feel better or more complete. Because really, isn't that what is at the very heart of this struggle, this pursuit of happiness? The very core of it is that we feel like we lack something. that something is deficient within us, that something is missing. And consumerism allows us to, for a moment, satisfy that need. Something is missing. Oh, maybe it's that record that I've been meaning to buy. I'll buy that. And then it shows up. And of course, you quickly maybe get like a rush of dopamine when the purchase arrives and Amazon drops it on your doorstep and you open the packaging and listen to the record for the first time. But it's going to fade. That's going to only have a very temporary release of this stress, of this anxiety, this lack that lives within all of us. And so the psychological term for what I'm talking about here is called the hedonic treadmill. And it's just this idea, this cycle of getting what we want and then adapting and wanting more. Oh, once I have this, then I'll be happy. But then once you get that, you find something else to be unhappy or dissatisfied about. I see it all the time with my house. We've been working on our house and fixing it up ever since we bought it. And it has come so far from when we first purchased it. And yet I still have a list in my head. Like, oh yeah, like we redid the bathrooms. It was a huge project, but you know what? I really want to do this piece, that piece next. Once you get past the initial enjoyment of fixing that one piece, you then move the goalposts, as they say. That's the part that gets lost in the hedonic treadmill, is that we lose sight of all that we have. There's not a lot of room for gratitude, or maybe there's only room for initial gratitude, but then it's like, no, like on to the next thing. Here's what I want now. One of my favorite stories about all of this, though, has to do with Kevin Durant. Yes, we're talking basketball. Kevin Durant is one of the best basketball players in the NBA. He's getting a little older now, but in his prime, he won the MVP once and was constantly in the conversation for being one of the absolute best players in the entire world. And he changed teams quite a bit. He was on the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then he left in a really crazy move and joined the best team in the league, the Golden State Warriors, and everyone was freaking out. And then after 2 years, he was maybe it was 3 years, really dissatisfied on the Warriors and asked for a trade, ended up on the Brooklyn Nets. Then after a little bit of time there, he asked for a trade from that situation and ended up on the Phoenix Suns. Here's why I'm telling you all this. One of the most profound insights about humanity and this hedonic treadmill that we live on that I've ever encountered came from a sports podcast that I was listening to during the time when Kevin Durant was demanding a trade off of the Brooklyn Nets. I was listening to this podcast, and the podcast host was saying, he's like, he was talking directly to Kevin Durant on his podcast. He's like, listen, Kevin, you were unsatisfied when you were on the best team of all time, that Golden State Warriors team. And so you demanded a trade to the Nets, and now you're unsatisfied even after you've gotten all these players shipped to you. And now you're demanding a trade to the Suns. But guess what? He said, that trade is not going to change anything because you're going to bring your bad attitude from the Nets right with you to the Suns, and nothing will change. And it's just so astute and profound. And it took a sports podcast for me to understand it. And here's the best part. He was right. This past summer, Kevin Durant was traded from the Suns to the Houston Rockets. But this sense that this is so much at the heart of our human predicament is that we always think that there's something lacking and that real happiness is just a moment away. A new job, a promotion, a success. I will be happy once and then fill in the blank. And that's all so future oriented. And when we get to that moment where we've accomplished that goal, we're going to still be future oriented if we don't do something to protect our mindset against that. It's good to have goals and it's good to have dreams, but it's not helpful to hinge your entire happiness and sense of well-being and self-worth on what comes next, because then you never appreciate what you have in the moment, and you're constantly living in this state of anxiety and lack, constantly feeling like something's out of place and that it doesn't quite sit right. Albert Camus, existential philosopher, writes about the Greek figure Sisyphus. This is a little gnarly, so hear me out. Sisyphus was someone who was condemned to Hades, and he has to roll the boulder up the hill all the time. And then as soon as he gets close to the top, the boulder falls back down and he has to do it again. And what Albert Camus says is that our life is often like Sisyphus, where we are the ones pushing the boulder up the hill. And then once we get to the top, we find some reason to be dissatisfied. And so the boulder goes back down the hill and we start all over again. Kevin Durant pushes the boulder up the hill, forces a trade to the Nets, and then a few years later is doing the same thing again. Boulders come back down. He's got to push it back up the hill, forcing a trade to the next team. You get the idea. But what Albert Camus says is that we need to picture Sisyphus as happy. Yeah. That the process is what brings the enjoyment, not actually completing the task, but the process itself. It's the journey, not the destination, to use an old cliche. Now, there's a lot there that we could pick apart, and I am not a scholar on Camus. And so it's probably even a little more nuanced than I'm articulating it. But that phrase, one must picture Sisyphus happy, really is a mind-blowing shift for us in recognizing, like, maybe it's not about satisfying the lack, because that is a hedonic treadmill that can never be satisfied. Maybe it's about finding the enjoyment in this contradiction, this discomfort, this wanting more, needing more. And now, hear me out. This is where the Christian faith, I think, really comes in. Because in Christianity, we speak about grace. Lutherans in particular really love this term. And it's one of the key points of the Protestant Reformation that Luther really tried to impress upon people, and that he felt like the Catholic Church at that time had gotten away from speaking about. And so in Luther's day, and in our day too, there was such an emphasis on works. Like, what are you doing? What have you done? What indulgences have you paid for? What have you accomplished? And so it's all about what you do. But grace absolutely breaks this system, because it says that it's freely given, that it's not something that's accomplished. It just is. God loves you as you are right now, in this moment. Even if you feel dissatisfied, not quite, that low-level disappointment in yourself or in your situation, and yet God loves you right there. Can that be enough? Do you see how this concept of grace frees us from chasing after perfection? Yeah, it's not about getting all the rules just right. It's also not about having the perfect home or the perfect family or the perfect job. It's about realizing that right now, this moment is enough because God says so. You, in this moment, are enough because God says so. And really grasping this concept of radical grace and love from the divine, notice how that frees you from the hedonic treadmill. If you can really allow it into your bones, if you can really accept your acceptance. That's the Paul Tillich phrase that I just love. Because now you suddenly have completely negated that lack that you feel. Oh yeah, like I am enough. This is enough. Now, what I need to say too, happiness is so much more complicated than I'm making it out to be. And yeah, it's also more than appropriate to make changes in your life. There, you could hear a lot of what I'm saying and just assume that it means that you don't have to do, right? Like, just be lazy. And I don't think that that's necessarily the solution. It's not about being lazy, or it's not about never making a change or shifting jobs or making a purchase again. But it's about learning to appreciate and be satisfied with the present moment. See, I think contentment should be more of what our focus is. Contentment. Can I be satisfied with who I am and how I am right now? And allow that to be enough, because God says it's enough. That there's not more to do or to accomplish, because God says that I am enough right now as it is. Can I be content? And can that contentment that is grounded in grace free me from constantly feeling like I need to make another purchase, accomplish another goal, make another large sweeping change, read another self-help book, find that life hack that's going to fix me? We can't life hack our way to happiness. That's the thing that no self-help book will ever tell you. You can't life hack your way to happiness. Contentment comes from something larger than just a strategy or a thought process or a mental model. So the Bible has some really incredible stuff to say about all this too. There's a whole section in the Old Testament that's called the wisdom literature. And it's a collection of books there. And I've always joked that I want to get a PhD in wisdom because that would be super cool and really impressive. And then I would feel good enough about myself. No, you see how the hedonic treadmill kicks in quickly. I just thought that would be funny to say, yeah, oh, yes, I have a PhD in wisdom. But also because I find those books fascinating. And this is biblical wisdom. This is wisdom that's been handed down for generations, thousands of years. Literally, it's existed and helped humans understand, how to deal with this thing called life that can be so tricky and sinister and hard sometimes. And so in that collection of books that we call the wisdom literature of Scripture, the book of Ecclesiastes is one that'll really mess with your head, because so much of what's written in there doesn't sound like the type of thing that you would hear in church. It starts off like Ecclesiastes chapter 1. We're introduced to this character, the teacher, the wise one. And the teacher says, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. That's how it starts. And then there's other places, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. It's talking about the ways that we as humans can just focus on the wrong thing and get so caught up in that which doesn't truly satisfy. And later on in Ecclesiastes, what it talks about is how joy is found in simple gifts, which is kind of what I've been saying all along here. Working for contentment, which is so often relational in nature, in appreciating being present with other people and being present in the moment. Why can't that be enough? Why do we have to always have an illusion of grandeur or something more? Can't we just look around and be so grateful for what is right in front of us right now? We already have it. You don't have to make a big change. It's right here. This gift of the moment, this grace that's made real again and again in each moment that we breathe and live and move and have our being, as it says in Acts. In the New Testament, though, I won't just keep it to the biblical wisdom of the Old Testament. Jesus also has some pieces to say about this. And in particular, the Gospel of John, I think, has language that's really helpful for understanding this. In John's Gospel, Jesus is constantly talking about abiding. Abide in me and my joy will be complete. That word abide shows up again and again and again. And scholars have written some really interesting insights into why Jesus emphasized abiding so much in John's Gospel. But in particular, I'm drawn to what Jesus says in John 15, where he says that promises like that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. And this word joy, not happiness, but joy, is really about something deep and abiding. If you look at the Greek word that's used and the way that that term gets thrown around in Greek culture and in other places in the scriptures, Jesus is speaking here about a deep, abiding, one might say, yeah, happiness, or what I like to say is content, a joy that's so much more than just a fleeting good feeling, but something long lasting and abundant. And so that's, in John's gospel in particular, what it seems like Jesus is constantly trying to lead people into a sense of this grace from God that allows them to escape the anxiety of never feeling like they're enough. Because that really is what creates this original question that we started the podcast with. Why am I not happy? There's probably a bunch of reasons. And that's a complicated question that I shouldn't be trying to answer really quickly. But in the same sense, I think a lot of our dissatisfaction around life comes from thinking that we have to do it all on our own, that there's more that we should be achieving or doing, and that if we do those things, then we'll be happy. This either or transactional type of approach to life, when what Jesus is trying to lead us into is to an understanding is that God loves us as we are, that we're enough right now, and that there is a joy found in recognizing this grace that is deep and abiding, and that moves us out of this anxious, lack-ridden mindset that seems to be so much a part of how we're programmed to operate by our society and world. And so I'll leave you with this, just a practical opportunity for you. It is a spiritual practice to try to help you ground yourself in a deeper level of contentment. And the spiritual practice is gratitude. We've talked about it so much on this podcast, I think. Every Thanksgiving or so, I like to bring that topic up. I'm a little early this year, but it's really true. The Brene Brown, I think I talked about this in the last podcast, but it's really sticking with me. Brene Brown talks about how joy and gratitude go hand in hand. So when we hear Jesus talking about making joy complete in us, yeah, I think that's also rooted in a sense of gratitude, right? Appreciating what we have right now. And so try to ground yourself in that every morning and every night. It's a really simple spiritual practice of just writing down 5 things from the day that you're thankful for. Using that as a groundwork for your prayer life. Talking with God and just saying thank you to God for those 5 little blessings. Starting your day that way, ending your day that way, and seeing how that type of programming for yourself can completely change and shift how you feel about everything that happens in between during your waking hours. Grounding yourself in a recognition of grace. Yes, because when we're thankful, we're recognizing that these are all gifts. That this is not something that we earned or that we deserved. It's something that was given to us. That's the heart of gratitude. And as we're saying, and gratitude is the heart of joy. So I hope that this can be helpful for just maybe reframing some of that existential dread you've been feeling. Yeah, maybe you do need to make a big change. Maybe you do need to make a purchase because you've been putting that off. But don't expect these pieces to be your salvation. A new job is not where salvation is found. A new purchase is not where salvation is found. Your salvation, that which saves you, is, as we say, through the grace made known in Jesus Christ. And I know I'm using churchy language here, but don't just write that off as the words we say in church. I'm hoping this whole conversation can help you see how incredibly practical these words really are. Salvation is not just about where you go when you die. Jesus wants to save you right now from your self-destructive tendencies, from this mindset, from this anxiety that you keep living on, from this hedonic treadmill that you insist upon. And that's what grace is about too. That's where salvation is found as well. Recognizing and believing and accepting that you are enough right now and that there's not anything more you need to do or change. Allow that grace to settle on you. Allow it to move you to a deep sense of gratitude and a deep sense of joy for what you have right now, who you are right now. I hope this is helpful. Let me know if you have any further questions, comments. Would love to carry on the conversation. And yeah, maybe share this with a family member or friend who's got some questions like this. And give that gratitude practice a try too. As always, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.